Now, everything that I've been doing so far has been a bash shell environment. You can take multiple bash commands and put them together in a text file and run that text file as a standalone program. That's a bash script, or more generally, a shell script. The only thing unique about doing this is this first line. That first line begins with a sharp character. It's also called a pound or a hash. And then the second character is this exclamation point. It's often called a bang character. So this sharp and bang together form what's called the shebang character. And this is referred to as the shebang line. That's a special line in a shell script that tells the operating system what command interpreter to use for interpreting all the commands that follow. This, in particular, is a bash shell script. You can also create Python scripts and Perl scripts. They're built in the same way. They'll have syntax that's specific to that language, and they start with a shebang line that tells the operating system what interpreter to use. So for bash shell scripts, in a Linux environment, it's not absolutely required to use this line, but it's just good form to always keep it there to make sure that these scripts are used only with the bash interpreter. And everything that follows can just be a standalone bash command, or you can have multiple bash commands on one line. In this example down here, I've got two commands together on a single line, separated only by a semicolon. That space is not necessary. If you use a semicolon, you can chain together a bunch of bash commands all on a single line. So I'm going to create a very simple bash shell script, and I'm going to use nano to do that. So I'm going to create a new script. I'm going to call it hello.sh. All right, here's my new file. I'm going to put the shebang bin bash. Now I can type any bash commands that I want my script to execute. I'll simply say something to the user. I'll run the date command to print the date. And let's see, I'll do something, print my name. All right, so there's my very simple, short bash shell script. And I'm going to save my file with Control W. Oops, sorry, not Control W. Control O. It's going to ask me if that's the correct name for my file. And yes, it is. Just press Enter. And then I'm going to close Nano with Control X. All right, so now I've created my shell script. Now there are a couple of issues with writing your shell scripts that I want you to be aware of, and I'm going to demonstrate that now. First of all, I'm going to try to run my shell script. So I'm going to type hello.sh, command not found. Now you may remember the bash shell goes searching for matches when you try to run a command. And it actually searches in a very specific place. It searches in this searches within this series of locations in the file system. This is the path environment variable. And that tells you all the places that bash will go searching for your executable programs. You can still run it. You can still run a program without it being in these directories. But being in these directories is how you can do things like run the date command. The date command can just be executed like that without specifying its location because it's in one of these search locations in the path. Now when I try to run my script, I get a command not found because it's literally not found. That program with that name is not found in any of those locations. So what I can do is I can tell bash to run the script from my current location, /. Now that will work. However, there's an additional problem I need to address. It's permissions. Right now, I don't have execute permission for this script. If I do a long listing, ls-l, you can see that my script, I haven't talked about permissions yet, but I will in just a little bit, but I want to give you a quick preview. I have read-write permissions, and my group has read permissions, and all other users have read permission, but I don't have execute. Like this loop.bash file, that does have execute permission, but hello.sh does not. So I need to add executable permission to that file. And the way I do that is with a command called changemod, and I can use u+x for it to apply just to my user account, or I can just use a +x for making it executable for all users. Okay, and now if I do a long listing, you see that my new hello sh script is now executable by everyone. So now I can finally run it. And that's what it does. It just prints out that string, it runs the date command, and then it prints out a string along with the value of a variable. In this case, the value of the user variable, which is just my username. All right, and that's running a bash script and making it executable. Another thing you can do with bash scripting is you can use some basic programming structures like for loops and while loops. In this case, this is a very simple bash script with a for loop that iterates from 1 to 10 and just does everything between the do and the done. And in this case, it just prints out some text. It prints out the value of that variable I. It sleeps for 1 second. That means it pauses execution for 1 second. That's what the sleep command does. It just pauses execution, prints out a little bit more text, and then prints out the date formatted in a certain way. And that formatting, what that does is just prints the time. And the way I learned to format the date is by looking in the man page for the date command. And that little for loop is in this intro Linux directory. There it is. It's called loop.bash. If I run it, it looks like this. Pausing for 1 second between each iteration, and it's using the value of the I variable in each line and printing the time. Not very interesting, but it gets the idea across. All right, the .bashrc file is the configuration file for your bash shell environment. If I cd to my home directory and take a look at my .bashrc file, you see that it contains just a little bit of information. This first part, since it begins with a pound or hash or sharp character, everything that follows that character is just considered a comment. It's not executed by the bash shell. Again, this next line is also just a comment. In this section, which you'll typically find in a bashrc file, it's just saying that if the system-wide bashrc file in this location, /etc bashrc, if that file exists, then execute it. Otherwise, well, there's no otherwise. If it exists, and execute it, and that's all. That's really all that says. And then this last part, user-specific aliases and functions. That section, everything below there, is for me to modify my environment as I see fit. And one of the things you can do there is you can add an alias, which is what I've done here. An alias is kind of like a shortcut for a program. Earlier, I was showing you how the ls command can be modified. There we go. The ls command can be modified by adding in some particular options. Well, if I want the ls command to use those options every time I type ls, I can use an alias to rename ls or to sort of point it to a different function, or even better, I can create a new function for myself. And first of all, I need to choose a function that a command that doesn't already exist. And so I'll try lx. All right, the lx command doesn't exist, and that's the example I've given in the slide here. I will edit my. I'm mixing up the syntax I use a little bit just to drive home the idea that you can do these same things in a lot of different ways. Here I'm using the tilde as a shortcut for my home directory, and I'm going to edit the .bashrc file in my home directory. And there it is. And I've already got an alias statement there, but here I'm going to change it. I'm going to make it LX, and I want to change those options a little bit. I'm not going to reverse the sorting, and I'm not going to include all files. And that's all I want to do. So I'm going to create a new command for myself called LX, and it will execute what's in between the single quotes here. It will run the ls command with these options every time I type LX. So I'm going to save that, Control O. It asks if that's the name of the file I want to write. Yes, it is. And then Control X to get out of there. And now, when I try to run LX, nothing happens because I just made that configuration file change. And now I need to implement that configuration file change. I need to make it take effect. And the way to do that is, as outlined in this slide, I need to use the source command. Source will execute my .bashrc file as if I just logged in. And that's what the bashrc file does. It's just a script file that's executed every time you log in. And instead of having to log out and log in again, which I could do, instead I'm just going to use the source command to read that file. And now it's been read, and now I should be able to use the LX command. And there it is. And that's how it works. So I've just created a new command for myself called LX, and it's just a modification of the pre-existing LS